He got into the Uber as just another passenger, but his red MAGA hat instantly made him a target of ridicule and scorn. The driver, full of indignation, abruptly ended the ride, kicked him out, and loudly declared he wouldn't drive someone like that. What happened next not only ended the driver's career, but left everyone who witnessed it stunned. How did the man they tried to humiliate turn out to be the one who held the fate of the entire company in his hands? David Carter, a humble billionaire with an ironclad sense of control and a deep love for his creations, always believed that true success came from understanding your business from the inside out. His company, Uber, was his pride and one of the most successful in the world. But David knew that no app could replace real-world experience. That's why he decided to personally test Uber's new Ride Quality Analysis feature, designed to enhance interactions between drivers and passengers. On this particular day, David chose a simple city route for his trip. Putting on his signature red MAGA hat, he didn't give much thought to how others might react. To him, the hat wasn't just a symbol of his political beliefs, but also a reminder of his commitment to standing by people's right to be themselves. He opened the app, selected the nearest car, and stepped outside with a faint smile. Minutes later, a car pulled up to the curb. Behind the wheel was a young man with a thick beard and a tense expression. This was Trevor, one of those drivers who treated Uber as a temporary gig and thought the job was beneath him. The moment he spotted David's red hat, his face twisted in disdain. He dramatically rolled his eyes, let out an exaggerated sigh, and muttered under his breath, "Great, another one of them." David, noticing the reaction, acted as though he hadn't heard it. Instead, he stepped closer, opened the door, and greeted the driver cheerfully. "Good morning. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Trevor's response was curt and unfriendly. "Mm-hmm. Just get in." David calmly settled into the back seat, sensing the thick tension in the air. The car jerked forward as Trevor started driving, barely glancing at the route. Moments later, he turned up the radio to full volume. The speakers blared a political podcast loudly criticizing Republicans. The hosts passionately ranted about how these people were dividing the country and referred to the red MAGA hat as a symbol of aggression. David glanced at the radio display, but said nothing. His face remained calm, though inwardly he was already analyzing the situation, wondering how far this driver would take his attitude. A few minutes into the ride, which now felt more like a test of patience than a commute, Trevor abruptly veered off the route. Instead of following the main road, he took a narrow side street, clearly an unnecessary detour. "This doesn't seem like my route," David said calmly, glancing at the GPS on his phone, which showed a completely different path. "I know what I'm doing," Trevor snapped without even looking back. The tone was sharp and cold, making it clear that Trevor's irritation had reached a boiling point. David chose not to argue. Instead, he took a deep breath, looked out the window at the unfamiliar streets passing by, and thought to himself, "I wonder how long he'll keep this up before things completely unravel." After a tense few minutes of driving, Trevor suddenly slammed on the brakes and pulled into a gas station. The abrupt stop jolted David slightly forward, but he remained calm, watching as Trevor turned around in his seat with an expression of exasperation and contempt. "Listen," Trevor began, raising his voice loud enough to be heard by anyone nearby. "I can't do this. I'm not driving you any further. It's uncomfortable for me to even be in the same car as someone like you." David raised an eyebrow, maintaining his composure despite the driver's hostility. "Someone like me?" he asked, his tone steady but questioning. Trevor leaned back, gesturing emphatically at David's MAGA hat. "Yes, someone wearing that. Do you even know what that stands for? I refuse to support people who represent everything that's tearing this country apart." David glanced around and noticed a few people nearby, turning their heads toward the car, clearly intrigued by the escalating scene. One of the gas station attendants, a young man in a bright yellow uniform, began making his way over, likely drawn by the commotion. "Is there a problem here?" the attendant asked cautiously, looking between Trevor and David. Trevor wasted no time in escalating the drama. He threw his hands in the air and dramatically pointed at David. "Yeah, there's a problem. This guy, he's one of those people. You know, the kind that thinks their opinions are the only ones that matter. I'm done driving him. He can walk if he's so proud of himself." David sighed quietly, his patience being tested. "You're really making a scene over a hat?" he asked, still keeping his voice calm. "Do you honestly think this is necessary?" Trevor smirked, sensing the attention of the small crowd that had started to gather. Some onlookers pulled out their phones, recording the unfolding altercation. Feeling emboldened by the murmurs of agreement from a few, Trevor raised his voice even more. "Necessary? Oh, absolutely. People like you think you can just waltz around, flaunting that symbol, expecting everyone to bow down to your beliefs. Well, not here. Not today. I'm standing up for what's right." The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, a mix of curiosity and amusement. David looked around, realizing that Trevor was feeding off the validation of the spectators. He sighed again and shook his head, speaking firmly this time. "You're seriously going to leave me here over this?" he asked, pointing to his hat. Trevor crossed his arms, his expression smug. "Damn right I am. You think everyone's just going to put up with it? Guess again?" David looked at him for a moment, his calm exterior betraying none of the thoughts racing through his mind. "All right," he said finally. "If that's how you want to handle this." He reached for his phone, the murmurs of the crowd growing louder as he began typing something into the Uber app. Trevor, meanwhile, basked in the attention of the onlookers, unaware that the situation was about to take a dramatic turn. As the tension in the air thickened, David took a deep breath and reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone with the deliberate calm of someone who had seen far worse situations. The crowd's murmurs grew quieter, as some of them noticed the calm determination in his expression. "All right," David said evenly, "if that's how you want to handle this." He opened the Uber app, but instead of the regular user interface, he navigated to a hidden menu, one only accessible to top-level executives and owners. Trevor, oblivious to the significance of what David was doing, leaned casually against the car, raising his phone to snap a selfie. He positioned himself so that David, sitting in the back seat with his MAGA hat, was prominently in the frame. "Let's see how social media likes this," Trevor sneered, extending his middle finger toward the camera. Caption: "Another clown bites the dust." David didn't react to the insult. His focus was on the screen as he quickly located Trevor's driver profile. Within seconds, he flagged the account for violations and typed a detailed report summarizing the incident. Just as he pressed submit, a prompt appeared, notifying him that the report had been escalated to the company's central office. Trevor chuckled, flipping through his phone as though he'd already won the day. "You can whine all you want," he said loudly, addressing both David and the growing audience. "But people like me, we're not gonna take your crap anymore." David glanced up briefly, his face calm, then returned to his phone. Moments later, it buzzed in his hand. He answered the call, his voice even and professional. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter," came a crisp voice on the other end. It was the head of driver operations for Uber. "We've just received your report. I assure you, we're already addressing the situation. Would you like me to come down personally to handle it?" David smirked faintly, his eyes flicking toward Trevor, who was still busy posing for his phone. "No need," he replied. "I think he'll figure it out soon enough." The manager hesitated. "Understood. If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to call." "Thank you," David said, ending the call. He tucked his phone back into his pocket and began gathering his belongings from the back seat. Trevor noticed and scoffed, clearly mistaking David's quiet composure for resignation. "Finally ready to leave, huh?" Trevor jeered. "Good choice. Maybe next time, don't advertise your hate." David stepped out of the car, adjusting his hat slightly. As he closed the door, he looked directly at Trevor and said with a faint smile, "You should really pay attention to who's sitting in your back seat. It might save you some trouble." Trevor frowned, confused for a moment, but before he could respond, David turned and walked toward the gas station. The murmurs of the crowd followed him, some whispering about his calm demeanor, others snapping photos of the scene. Trevor shrugged and dismissed the remark, still basking in what he thought was his victorious stand. Little did he know, the real fallout had only just begun. The following morning, Trevor received an email from Uber's headquarters requesting his presence at a meeting. The message was vague, but Trevor interpreted it as recognition for what he saw as his principled stand. Confident that the company was about to applaud his actions, he donned a crisp shirt and headed to the address provided, imagining a room full of supportive executives ready to pat him on the back. When he arrived at the Uber headquarters, he was directed to a sleek conference room. Trevor entered with his head held high, but his confidence evaporated the moment he saw who was seated at the head of the table. David Carter. The sight of the man Trevor had humiliated less than 24 hours earlier left him momentarily stunned. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. David, seated calmly with his hands folded on the table, gestured to a chair across from him. "Have a seat," David said, his tone even but unmistakably authoritative. Trevor hesitated, his bravado rapidly unraveling. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tinged with unease. "What are you doing here?" David leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I'm here because this company is mine. I'm the founder of Uber, and today we're here to discuss your behavior." Trevor's face turned pale as the weight of David's words sank in. "Wait, what? You're the—" "Yes," David interrupted, sparing him the embarrassment of finishing the sentence. "And yesterday, you made the decision to discriminate against a passenger, me, based on my appearance and beliefs. Let's take a look at how that aligns with our company's values." David turned to an assistant seated near the door, who pressed a button to display a presentation on the large screen behind him. The first slide was a report of Trevor's actions during the ride, written by David himself. It detailed every rule Trevor had violated, from deviating from the route to creating a hostile environment for a passenger. But that was only the beginning. The next slide displayed a log of complaints from other passengers over the past few months. Trevor's behavior had been flagged multiple times for rudeness, unprofessionalism, and even refusing rides under questionable circumstances. The evidence was overwhelming. Trevor tried to interject, his voice shaky. "Look, David raised a hand, cutting him off. "I understand that people have bad days, but what you did yesterday wasn't just a bad day. It was a deliberate act of discrimination, and that is something we do not tolerate at Uber." As Trevor sank lower in his chair, David continued. "What's worse is that your actions didn't just affect me. Do you know how many people recorded that scene yesterday? How many videos are already circulating online? You've not only embarrassed yourself but also damaged the reputation of the company you work for." Trevor's eyes widened. "Wait, people posted that?" David nodded. "Oh yes, and I'd say public opinion isn't exactly on your side." The assistant switched to a live feed of social media posts, showing clips of the incident that had gone viral overnight. Comments flooded the screen, with many condemning Trevor's actions and praising David's calm demeanor. Some posts even pointed out the irony of Trevor's behavior toward the very man who created the platform he worked for. "Effective immediately," David said, his tone firm. "Your account as a driver for Uber will be deactivated. You're no longer associated with this company. Additionally, we reserve the right to pursue further action if necessary." Trevor's mouth opened and closed as he searched for a response, but none came. He was too stunned to argue. The realization of how badly he had miscalculated left him speechless. David stood up, gathering his papers. As he moved toward the door, he paused and turned back to Trevor. With a faint smile, he said, "Next time, before you judge someone, take a moment to find out who they really are. It might save you a lot of trouble." And with that, he walked out, leaving Trevor alone to contemplate the full extent of his mistakes.